Hello, my name is Jake,
And my name is Luke Wyatt.
and this is Climate Change, Ocean Acidification, and Marine Life. And for our experiment, we asked, do shells decompose more rapidly in more acidic water? And for our research paper, we looked at the causes and effects of climate change.
Abstract. Climate change is a rising issue in the world today. With the rise of carbon emissions and the increasing temperatures around the world, how are the ocean and marine organisms affected? The chemistry of the ocean is changing as the water becomes more acidic, reducing pH levels and potentially having negative effects on marine life. This project looks at how a decrease in pH levels in the ocean impacts cell composition through the use of chalk and shells. The chalk and shells were tested in two groups of water, one with tap water, high pH level, and lemon water, low pH level, throughout 3 trials. We hypothesized that the shells in chalk will decompose more rapidly if we decrease the pH level of the water. Our hypothesis was supported as the results from our experimental group, low pH level, showed that an increase in acidity causes an accelerated reaction of decomposition in the shells in chalk. Our results demonstrate just how much more cells decompose in more acidic water. Our observations provide evidence for the need to reduce pollution of the environment in order to slow down the changes in climate.
Introduction. Climate change has been an increasing problem in the world for many years. Decades of scientific research have provided insight into climate change. As the climate changes, various aspects of the Earth change as well. Rising temperatures, receding glaciers, greater precipitation in some regions, lower precipitation in other regions, greater frequency and magnitude of natural disasters, and more disease outbreaks affect the way the planet functions. Climate change has been shown to have various effects on the ocean, changing the ocean's chemistry. In marine ecosystems, a rise in carbon dioxide and climate change are associated with an increase in temperature, the movement of marine organisms to different environments, the grouping together of different species, and a drop in concentration of dissolved oxygen in the ocean. Also, the rising temperature is associated with reduced ocean pH levels. Carbon dioxide emissions have led to reduced pH levels because the ocean absorbs the emissions and becomes more acidic. pH level is a way of measuring how acidic or basic water is. The neutral pH is 7, and below 7 shows acidity. Since pre-industrial times, the average pH levels of the ocean has decreased by around 0.1. If carbon emissions continue to rise, it is predicted that the pH will decrease by 0.4 by 2100 and by 0.78 by 2300. These reduced pH levels can cause behavior changes in animals and plants and impact the composition of cells. The cells, which are primarily composed of calcium carbonate, may dissolve more quickly in the more acidic water. This possibility gave rise to a question: do cells decompose more rapidly in more acidic water? To find answers to our question, we created an experiment with 3 trials that tested the effects of ocean acidification. We used 2 bowls, both filled with tap water. We chose citric acid as an acidic substance and used Clorox pull test strips to find the pH level of the water. We picked lemons from a lemon tree in our backyard and filled 1 bowl with lemon juice. We used an array of cells that we had previously found at different beaches. Our cells consisted of barnacle shells, clam shells, and oyster shells. We also used chalk because it is mainly composed of calcium carbonate, just like shells. We tested how much faster the cells in the lower pH water would dissolve by comparing it with the results of the chalk. By observing the bubbles that come from chalk when it is in water, we were able to discover how much more accelerated the decomposition of calcium carbonate is in more acidic water.
Data and results. In trial 1, we used 2 cups of tap water in each bowl and half a cup of lemon juice in the experimental group. The experimental group had a pH level of 6.8. The control group had a pH level of 8.4. The chalk in the experimental group started to bubble on an average of 2.34 seconds faster. The trial lasted 9 days. The shells in the experimental group had visible color loss and a large hole that spanned nearly half of the shell appeared on the barnacle cell. The cells in the control group didn't change. The chalk in the experimental group was much more rough in appearance. In trial 2, we used 2 cups of tap water in each bowl and 1 cup of lemon juice in the experimental group. The experimental group had a pH level of 6.2, while the control group had a pH level of 8.4. The 2 chalk sticks in the experimental group started to release gas in the form of bubbles on an average of 1.555 seconds faster than the control group. The trial lasted 7 days. The cells in the experimental group had lost their color. The oyster cell lost much of its mass. The cells in the control group had no loss of color or mass. The chalk was more deteriorated in the experimental group.
In trial 3, we used 1 cup of tap water in each bowl and half a cup of lemon juice in the experimental group. The experimental group had a pH level of 6.2, while the control group had a pH level of 8.4. In the experimental group, the bubbles began to rise on an average of 1.55 seconds faster. The trial lasted 7 days. In the experimental group, the cells lost color. However, there was no notable loss of mass. The chalk sticks in the experimental group were rougher, and there were depressants in the chalk that were not visible in the control group. The cells in the control group had no observable changes.
Analysis and conclusion. We hypothesized that if we decrease the pH level of the water, the cells in chalk will decompose more rapidly. There was more decomposition in the experimental group than in the control group, as shown by the effects the citric acid had on the cells in chalk. These results, in addition to the data of the bubbles coming from the chalk sticks, show that decomposition occurred quicker in the experimental group. Therefore, our hypothesis was supported. Looking back on our data, we wish we would have measured the weight of the cells in chalk to see how much their weight would be affected.
We would still say that our experiment was successful in answering our question, do cells decompose more rapidly in more acidic water? We had the most difficulty finding chalk sticks with calcium carbonate because most chalk sticks today are made of gypsum, also known as calcium sulfate. By observing the results of our experiment, we can support our opinion that actions must be taken to lessen the effects of climate change, or else the ocean and its inhabitants will suffer.